Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today we're going to be ranking Season 2 of Doctor Who. So, since the box set right here did come out recently, and I have finally managed to see all of Season 2, which is crazy because at the beginning of this year I had never seen any of Season 2. But thanks to a lot of you guys sending in DVDs, I have been able to watch, I had most of it. I'd seen 2/3 of it before the box set even came out. And it's nice that I got to kind of see it spread out throughout the year instead of having to cram it all in when the box set came out right here at the end of the year. So I definitely appreciate all the DVDs everyone sent. And it was nice to finish it up with the box set as well. I especially liked the recons for the Crusade. They were very well done. So we have 9 stories. And the bottom 2 were really hard to pick between because I really only think this season really only has 2 weak stories. 2 of them that just keep it from being like shining perfection. It is such a good season. I think 7 of the stories are really strong. These bottom 2, I kept going back and forth on which one deserved to be at the bottom because they both do bad things. That's why they're both right here close to the bottom. But they both do good things I like that deserve mentioning. So I flipped back and forth on them a lot. But eventually I did settle on, in 9th place, The Web Planet. Probably not surprising, it's The Web Planet. And The Web Planet is a really hard watch, to be honest. I really struggled getting through it when I watched it for the first time earlier this year. But The Web Planet does have some things going for it. I will always give The Web Planet credit for its ambition. There is a lot of ambition behind this story. It's a very ambitious undertaking. I will always defend that quality of this story. Always. I will die on that hill for this story, that it is ambitious. So I give kudos to the attempt made. I will always give The Web Planet that. And some of the execution works. The problem is the parts of the execution that don't work, for me, really don't work. However, let's talk about the good parts. The set design when they're walking around on the planet's surface, I think, looks really good. I mentioned this in my individual reviews of the episodes. A lot of times when they're walking around on kind of the exterior of the planet, I like a lot of that set design. And it has some really good shots. Like there's at one point when I think the Doctor and Ian are on kind of a cliff and they're pointing down something. Hey, Doctor, look over there. I enjoyed that camera shot. There were several moments, and I talked about this in those reviews, where there were really nice looking camera shots that were done because the set design was so well done. I cannot applaud that enough, or laud that enough. The Menoptra, I really like their outfits. Their outfits are really impressive. Again, we're talking 60s Doctor Who, 60s effects with a 60s classic Doctor Who budget. I think the Menoptra outfits look really impressive. And the Menoptra kind of have their own little body language. And I guess whether that works, or not is kind of up to you. But the outfits look really well done. And I have to admit, there's several scenes of them taking off into flight and landing that look really nice, especially that one iconic shot that's used in the trailer. When you see him take off and fly, that's a really good shot. Again, there's several of them landing that look really impressive for 60s Doctor Who. These Zarbi outfits, I think, look really good. Aside from the very human-looking legs they're walking around on, which they do several times, oftentimes, kind of hide where you don't see that as noticeably. That actually looks, pretty good. I like the Zarbi outfits. And I think the main cast do a good job in this. I enjoyed them in this as well. Then there's the downside. The Vaseline used to kind of give the planet that otherworldly look does not work. It just looks like a blurry smear, a messy smear. It looks terrible. It was a terrible idea, and it doesn't work. These Zarbi bumping the camera. I'm not going to necessarily say that's bad, but it is awfully hilarious when he actually just bumps the camera. It's one of those things like, they left it in. Well, they couldn't redo it. The interior shots a lot of times, like when they're kind of in the creature's domain, like where Hartnell and Maureen O'Brien are, a lot of the story doesn't really work. I do like the thing when he communicates with it, the little thing that circles around his head, how it has the kind of spiderweb look to it. That's pretty cool. But the inside areas don't really look that good. And that final inside area at the end of the story when they confront the creature, which is supposed to be some kind of spider, but it's more like a glowing light. That interior room looks terrible. When it's supposed to look like spider webs everywhere, it's awful. Awful, 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 awful. Terrible. The sounds the Zarbi makes. That's in a competition for the Ballad of Johnny Ringo for the worst audio in Doctor Who ever. Those sounds are awful, and they get more grating over time. Like, they didn't bother me at first, but just over time they got more and more grating. I think I actually did enjoy episode 5 of the story, just because you don't hear that sound a lot. I think that sound's hardly in the episode, and it really perked me up to the episode. But that sound just makes me want to scream. I'm like, maybe I should just turn the volume down and pretend I know what they're saying. I get the general idea anyway. And then the grub people, which I know wasn't the writer. The director came up with the grub people. And I don't like the grub people. It seems unnecessary. The actor playing the lead grub guy with his talking weird voice is awful. Terrible. I just think they were unnecessary. The biggest problem with the Web Planet is it's too long. It should have been a 4-parter. If you'd made it a 4-parter, cut out the grub people and some of the unnecessary other stuff in it, like the Vaseline shots, it would have worked way, way better, in my opinion. At number 8 on the list, just slightly above it, is The Chase. Now, again, I battled between these two on which one went at the bottom, because I do find the Web Planet to be much more ambitious than The Chase. The Chase is not a very ambitious story. It's kind of by the numbers. It really is the epitome of Terry Nation going, good enough. This'll do. You know, I do think kind of after the first 2 Dalek stories, with only rare exception, Terry Nation was just kind of like, screw it. I make money off the Daleks. There you go. There's another Dalek story. Pay me. You know, I mean, he almost did that with Genesis. Genesis was originally very different. Barry was like, this is a great script, Terry, but you sold it to me a year ago and sent it back to go rewrite it. And because of that, we got Genesis, which is amazing. But the reason why it's slightly above Web Planet is I do enjoy the first episode of The Chase. I think the first episode of The Chase is really good. And I love the final episode of The Chase. I think the final episode of The Chase is pretty phenomenal. I really, really enjoyed it. I think it's a great send-off for Ian and Barbara. I love the final shots of them, and I love how it shows at the end the Doctor and Vicky are watching them on the little TV thing, which ties it around back to the beginning of the episode when they were tinkering with it. I really enjoyed that companion send-off, so it gets points for that. I enjoyed meeting Steven, and I like how Steven kind of talks in this episode. He doesn't quite talk the same after that, but I enjoy how he kind of talks in that. I like the mechanoids a lot. They're neat. Their voices are a little 60s, but I love they have the little grappling hooks. I love the battle scene between the Daleks and the mechanoids, because despite not being that long and being done on a 60s Who budget, it looks pretty epic. It actually has this kind of epic look to it, the way they're intercutting shots in a type of camera style that was very uncommon for classic Doctor Who, when the cameras are just cutting that fast, and then you have the kind of smoke effect over it, and then the flame effects. But that's really, really good, and I really enjoyed that. I liked episode 6 a lot. Then there's the rest of it. Episode 2 was meh. I didn't like the fish people and their outfits. They're terrible, even by classic Who standards. They are terrible. They make underwater menace fish people look good. Terrible. I did like episode 3 a bit, especially that first half on the Empire State Building with Peter Purvis, even though it's not Stephen, it's Peter Purvis. And yes, I do know that him doing that's what led to him getting the role of Stephen. I did see that. That's awesome. I like that. I enjoyed him in that role. He's hilarious. His Texas accent's hilarious. I mean, it's a bit stereotypical and it's awfully thick, but I love it. Even though I think he claims he's from Alabama. Isn't he supposed to be from Alabama? But that's a Texas accent all the way, especially with the hat. It's hilarious. I absolutely Love that. He's great in it. I love the fact even the Dalek doesn't kill him. I like the fact the Dalek just... I like when he's walking around the Dalek and the Dalek's eye is just kind of trailing. I don't know why that amuses me, but it does. And then the Dalek, once he finds out the Doctor's left, he just back into the machine. He doesn't even take the second to kill him. He's like, what is up with this guy? It's like the Dalek's the one that wants to get away. I don't know why that amuses me, but it does. The second half on the Mary Celeste is... it's neat as an idea. I don't know if it works. It's just it's all right. The weak parts are episodes 4 and 5. Episode 4 is hot garbage and a waste of time and needed to be cut. It's dumb. It's dumb. It's awful. And it seems like it's edited really badly at times. There are things that happen that don't make sense where I'm like, okay, Vicky and Barbara are separated. Vicky disappears somehow. We don't ever find out how. Barbara disappears. And when we see them, they somehow made it back and met up with each other. I feel like something got edited out here. And then I don't know. I don't like episode 4. It's one of the biggest waste of time I've ever seen in Doctor Who, where I'm like, well, I'm never getting that part of my life back. And then episode 5 doesn't really go anywhere either because they try to capitalize on the robot doctor, which is a wasted idea. I've always known it was either Space Museum or The Chase that had the robotic doctor in it. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty neat. Goes nowhere. Sometimes it's Hartnell playing him. Sometimes it's not. It's very obvious which is which. Some of the times when you swear it should be Hartnell, but I know they shot it live. Maybe they couldn't. The fight between the doctor and the robot is... like, the robot's so vulnerable, you just grab a cord and pull it, and the robot's like letting him pull it. Ooh, that's awful. It's awful. The only thing episode 5 does well is setting up for episode 6 with them running into the mechanoids. And it does have a couple really nice shots of that city in it, which you see more of in episode 6. Yeah, episodes 4 and 5 are basically a waste, except for what they should have done was had episode 3, the first half be on the Empire State Building, the second half be setting up for the final episode, and then having the final episode and just made it a 4-parter. That would have worked a lot better. But Terry Nation likes his money, so he will write more words for more money. Yeah, The Chase is a big mix of good and bad. Number 7 on the list, and this was hard because the other 7 I all like to one degree or another. Number 7 is The Rescue, which I enjoy. It's a great little 2-parter. It does a good job introducing Vicky, and I like Vicky a lot. I love her very real reaction when Barbara accidentally kills her little pet dog thing because Vicky thought it was trying to harm her. Because, for Vicky, that's pretty much the only friend she probably had. The one injured guy is not very friendly to her, which we learn more on later. So that's kind of her only friend, especially with her dad having just died. She's an orphan now. And then Barbara just killed the only friend she really had. I understand why she's upset as she is, especially at her young age. And then I love Hartnell in this. And I love Hartnell and Maureen O'Brien together in this. The kind of grandfatherly, grandpaternal, I guess, instinct he takes over her, especially having just lost Susan. I love the conversations between the First Doctor and Vicky in this story. They're very touching, very moving, and great acting from both of them, but especially from Hartnell. That it makes it very touching for me. Like the first time they talk after, she kind of shoos Ian and Barbara out, and he's like, "Come here, child, come here," and he sits down and chats with her. It's beautiful stuff. And then I love the fact that the villain of the story, who, like a lot of classic Doctor Who, looks, it's a guy in a suit. It's kind of when you see it, you're like, all right, it's a guy in a suit. We know, but we're in suspension of disbelief. And then it turns out to actually be a guy in a suit. I love that. I love the kind of meta of that. I do love that. I'm always going to love that about the story. The actor playing the injured guy from the ship, he's a little to me, to be honest. But I'm always going to enjoy that. It's a great little 2-parter. I don't know if it would have worked as 4 parts, but it's a great little 2-parter. Trying to read my handwriting here. Number 6 on the list is the Space Museum. I like the Space Museum more than most. I've always been told it's got a really good first episode, and then it just kind of goes downhill from there. And that's true to an extent, But for me, it's not so much the first episode is good and then the other 3 episodes are terrible. It's more the first episode is really good and sets up a lot of really high concept ideas and does a lot of neat things that get resolved at the end of that episode, and that the other episodes simply fail to live up to that, and they become a more by-the-numbers Doctor Who adventure. But in and of themselves, they're fine. I actually enjoyed episodes 2, 3, and 4 of the Space Museum. I thought it was fine. I love when the guys run back to check on their one guy who had the doctor captured, and instead they find the guy tied up, and he's like, I don't know what happened. I turned around for a second and suddenly a whirlwind hit me. Because it's easy to forget the first Doctor can physically fight when he has to. He's not just, the old man thinking doctor. He can engage in fisticuffs when he needs to. So I love that little reminder here of just what all the first Doctor can do when he needs to. And then when they run off, finding him hiding in the Dalek, that's adorable. Hartnell looks like he's having a ball right there in the Doctor. I fooled them, ha ha. That grin on his face is perfect. So I enjoy that. It has a nice little ending. I love the group of guys who run the museum because I live for their Super Saiyan Widow's Peak. That's what I call the hairstyle like they all have. It's like a Super Saiyan Widow's Peak. I live for that. I live for it. I love it. I'm there for it. And then I like the fact that even the people who live on the planet have this thing going on with their eyebrows. So they look mostly human, but not quite human. I like that little bit to differentiate them from humans. I like that. So I think the Space Museum is good. The highlight is, of course, the first episode. A lot of really neat ideas going on in the first episode. One of those episodes where Doctor Who really remembers the Doctor as a time travel and you play with that mechanic. It resolves at the end of that first episode. It kind of breaks down into a more average by the numbers story, but still a fun watch. I can see myself going back and rewatching the Space Museum. Number 4 and 5, I actually had to switch. I originally had them in one order and I ended up flipping them. At number 5, we're going to go with the Crusade. This may be higher if it was complete, but it's still a really good story. Julian Glover is great as King Richard. I enjoy Jean Marsh as his sister. I like the guy playing the ruler of the Egyptians and his brother. They're both done really well. And neither of them, nobody is cast as the bad guy out of them. They just all have their own reasons for doing what they're doing. Even the ruler of the Egyptian group has his own code and his own sense of honor. He's not portrayed as just the Dick Dastardly type. And his brother's not evil. I enjoy that. They're portrayed as real people, which I like. I enjoy that development. I love watching the Doctor in one scene stealing the clothes from the merchant because he knows the merchant got the clothes from someone who stole them, knowingly got them from someone who stole them. And I love how that resolves later. When we find out it's like the Chamberlain they were stolen from. I love how the first Doctor resolves all of that. That's great. I enjoy it. The recons for episode 2 and 4 are really good. I think episode 1 looks pretty good considering the condition of the print when it was scanned in 99, and I do know they're working off the 99 scan. And I really liked episode 3. I really enjoyed the Wheel of Fortune. That was possibly one of my favorite single episodes of classic Doctor Who. I really, really engaged with that one. I loved just everything going on in it. The fight between Richard and his sister was a great fight. And I understand both of their points of view. It was really well done. And seeing how angry Richard was at the Doctor because he thought the Doctor had betrayed him. But then when he found out they didn't, I'm sorry, my apologies. I like the fact that even the kind of, I won't say evil knights in it, but even the knights who don't really care for the Doctor and his company, they have their own sense of honor. Like the one that's going to execute the Doctor at the end when Ian's like, well, I had more of a grievance on him. He's like, yes, you do. You may execute him. And the Doctor's like, I have a final request. Granted, I want to see the city one last time. Granted. There's that still sense of honor. It's not so much that the knights are bad guys. They have their code and they don't agree with what the king is doing. They think the only way it can be won is battle. So that it's not so much good guys and bad guys in this. It's just people with different points of view in a lot of cases. And I really enjoyed that. And just, again, it looks good. I I really wish the story completely existed. I really did. I think it's a phenomenally good watch. And if it existed in total, it would probably be higher on the list. And I even probably like it better than a couple of the ones that rank higher. But like the next one up on the list is ranked higher for other reasons, which we'll talk about. Next on the list is the Dalek Invasion of Earth. Now, I probably prefer the Crusade, as I think it's a better story, but Dalek Invasion of Earth is iconic for so many reasons. It is an iconic story. I think it's the first truly great Dalek story, because I didn't really care for the original Daleks too much. It's way too long. It just drags. Whereas I think this one does really well at 6 parts. I love the iconic location work done with the Daleks running around London and these very famous London areas. I'm pretty sure plenty of people in Britain have, or in England, Britain, all of that, have been to London and actually been to those areas and been like, Daleks were here once. That's got to be a cool feeling. I enjoy that. I love Susan's farewell. It's really well done, really well written, really well acted. Hartnell's speech at the end is such a phenomenal speech. Well written, again, well acted. Easily, I think, the First Doctor's most iconic moment. So well delivered. And then I just enjoy the story. Again, it never really drags for me. I love the iconic shot of the Dalek coming out of the water. I don't even know how they pulled that off, but it looks so good. It's such a good story. I think it's legendary for a reason. It's a good watch. And it has a strong rewatchability factor, in my opinion. Definitely the first truly great Dalek story. Number 3 for me is the Time Meddler. Again, another really, really iconic story, I think. Peter Buttersworth is great as the meddling monk. And I've learned, he was kind of a comedic actor. I know he was in the Carry On, movies, series. I've never seen any of them. I just know he's famous for them. And I can tell by the way he does some of the scenes that he definitely is a comedic talent. Some of the looks he gets on his faces sometimes are just perfect. I love meeting Stephen. I love the Doctor explaining things to Stephen. This is this, this is this, this is this, this is this, and this is this. Now go away and stop bothering me. I love that. Very First Doctor. And of course we get the First Doctor's other most iconic line. What do you think it is? A space helmet for a cow? For a cow? I love that. I love that. That's hilarious. And very First Doctor while still being hilarious. I like the fact that the First Doctor gets some moments on his own. And of course, Vicky and Steve get to kind of team up and work together a bit on this. I love the First Doctor when he figures stuff out, when he finds the little record player and he's like, and how that turns into indignation when the little cell drops the bar doors and the monk's laughing at him and Hartnell's got that look in his face like, how dare you, let me out, let me. I love that. I also love that even though Hartnell's not in episode 2, it doesn't hurt the story. I mean, obviously he was on holiday, but it's not detrimental to the story. He's locked in the cage. I never feel like I do in some episodes like 10 Planet episode 3 or one of the episodes of Dalek Invasion of Earth when he's just not there and it feels weird. It doesn't feel weird here. It's perfectly fine. And I love finding out that he still managed to escape the cell. I enjoy that. And I love when he's holding the monk, like when he has the stick behind him. He's like, I've got a Remington rifle or whatever in your back, a Winchester 37 or whatever. It's just the stick. And then later he has him at sword point. And I love how he sabotages the monk's TARDIS. And the monk's just like, when he's reading the letter, he's just kind of laughing about it. But then he looks in his TARDIS. He's like, Doctor! I like the meddling monk. It's a great little story. It's a mix of action and adventure and humor. Really good story. Number 2 on the list, which might surprise some people, is the Romans. I like the Romans because once you realize and catch on that the Romans is a comedy, you can have such a ball with it. I know I was watching the behind the scenes, and I know the people watching the behind the sofa, I should say, weren't as enamored with it, but I love it. I think it's funny. I love watching Doctor Who do comedy. Crimson Horror has a good amount of it in it. Unicorn and the Wasp has a good amount of it in it, and they're both fun watches. I find the Romans like that. Part of this comes down to the guy who plays Nero is fantastic at it. He is playing this kind of man-child version of Nero so well. This self-indulgent 5-year-old who has all the power and doesn't like when he doesn't get his way and can be nice to you one minute and, be ready to kill you the next if he feels the slightest bit of a slight, He'll offer you riches one second and offer to burn you at the stake the next. So that's interesting. And a lot of it comes down to how he does his voice and his facial expressions. He does look like a child who's sulking sometimes, like when he plans to feed the doctor to the lions and the doctor knows and the doctor's teasing him about it. Oh, yes, I should do a little piece, first. Something they can really sink their teeth into. And he's basically telling Nero, I know what you're planning to do. And Nero's like, you guessed. Like, you want me to perform at the Colosseum? You guessed. Like he spoiled his little surprise. Like somebody told his punchline before he could. Like a little 5-year-old child would be, upset. He almost looks like he's going to cry. And so a lot of that, I do think, is just the guy playing Nero plays that version of Nero perfectly for the story. I think the him running around after Barbara stuff's funny. I know in 2022, people might look at that like, I think it's hilarious. I'm old enough to remember when that was comedy. So, and again, it's supposed to be farcical. I think that's funny. I love the fact that even during that, Vicky and the doctor keep missing Ian and Barbara. Like, Vicky and the doctor still think Ian and Barbara are just back at the little house they were at, taking a nap or whatever. They never quite run into each other. They keep having those almost misses. And again, I love when the doctor, when he has to fight the one guy trying to assassinate him, I think at the beginning of part 2. And so he actually does fight the guy. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, the first doctor can fight when he needs to fight. And when Vicky kind of butts in and ruins it, and the guy ends up going out the window, the doctor's like mad at her. Like, why did you interrupt? I was having a good time. I like to engage in some fisticuffs. I enjoy that. Hartnell also seems like he's having a fun time in the story. He really does. Everyone does, to be honest. I really like the fight scene, the kind of gladiatorial fight, too, with Ian and the guy who's kind of Ian's friend when Nero is making them fight each other. That's actually really well done. As they mentioned in the Behind the Sofa, I see Williams had some, fencing practice or sword training, and it does look like that because, well, let's be honest, sometimes the fights in the 60s Doctor Who are, well, let's be nice and say unconvincing. They're not exactly the most well choreographed, if they're even choreographed. Sometimes I think it's like, just go out there and do something. They're not usually the most convincing. But you do run into some of those sometimes, like this one, that are actually executed pretty well. They're moving pretty fast with those swords when they're tap, 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 tap. I remember when I was watching it the first time, I was like, that's pretty good. I mean, that's pretty good in general, but for 60s classic Doctor Who, that's really good. I was really impressed with that whole scene. I did like that. I thought the scene when they were on the ship, when Ian's on the ship and the ship ends up crashing, I thought the scene on the ship was done really well. I just really did enjoy this city. This story. And of course, when Rome does catch up in flames, Vicky's kind of like, this is your fault. And he's like, me? No. He refuses to take any accountability for it. I love the fact he's still in that mindset when he mentions it in the fire of Pompeii. I really had nothing to do with it. That's funny to me. I do love, though, too, when he accidentally sets fire to the map at first, again, Nero's like, you fool, I'll have you in chains, and, you genius, I'll show you with riches. I love the way he plays it. I like the Romans. It's funny. It's good comedy. And then number 1 on the list, which also might surprise people for me, is Planet of Giants, which I just really like Planet of Giants. Now, I've only watched it the one time. Maybe I'll feel different on rewatch, but I do enjoy it. It has a very theatrical approach to it, which, again, a lot of 60s Doctor Who does. I mean, it's pretty much shot live in sequential order. But it has that feel to it, especially with the set design. I love the set design of the story when they're supposed to be, this big in the tall grass, especially that one when they're on the sink, when they're standing in the sink by the drain. That looks so good. When they're next to like a bunch of giant matches and stuff. I love the set design for this story. I like the scene when the one guy shoots the other guy for a minute. It goes on for a minute. It's almost like I'm watching a small part of a Perry Mason episode right there. And I love me some Raymond Burr Perry Mason. I do. So I enjoyed that. I like Planet of Giants. And I don't know if I would have liked it better in the original 4 parts. I've never watched that recon edit. Or if it works better in 3 parts. There's a lot going on in part 3 since it is 3 and 4 edited together. But I enjoy that. It's one of those I actually plan on giving a rewatch sometime soon and maybe doing like a rewatch review on not each part individually, just the story as a whole. Because it's just fun. I really, really enjoyed it. And again, set design's great. So that's how I rank season 2 of classic Doctor Who, which I really liked. I did love season 2. It's a very strong season. I see now why so many people like season 2. A lot of people tell me it's Hartnell's best. I've heard people say it's one of the best. It's a really, really strong season in Doctor Who. Really strong. I would like to know what you think of season 2 and all of the stories in it. So comment down below and let me know. Other things to do, click the like button and the subscribe button. That helps me out, and I certainly appreciate it. Always nice to get a good thumbs up, so I appreciate that. I also have a Patreon if you like what I do and would like to contribute to what I do. That does help me keep the bills paid. There's a link to that down in the description below. I want to give a thanks to Thomas, who joined recently. It's always nice to get a new patron. I really appreciate it, Thomas. Many, many thanks for that. I also want to give a shout out to some of my top tier patrons, Colin Coney, Stephen Crane, and Finn Perkins. I appreciate their continued support, as I do the support of all of my patrons, each and every one of you. I also have a P.O. box if there's anything you would like to send me. That's how I got to watch quite a bit of season 2, actually, was DVDs people sent, which I appreciate. I know Steve will sent me my first 2. Robin sent a couple as well. Several of you sent stories. Very appreciative. My P.O. box is down there, as is a link to my Amazon wish list with even more DVDs on it as well. Most importantly, though, thank you for watching.